let's create a new project for today. And go to Eclipse. Let me just make sure it's really recording. Good. Okay, let's create exercise 2 for today. So Java projects, you would say CSE114, Spring 16, Week 04, Lab 2. Okay, so let's create a new class over here called Array Facilities. So we're going to just create from scratch. Okay, a new class, Array Facilities, and with a main method there. Okay, now let me just demonstrate to you what the expected output should be. Okay, I do have some program already, but I just want to run it to show you, and then we'll go ahead and implement that. Okay, so now you have run that program here for you. So basically, first of all, your program should really ask the user, how many numbers would you like to process? Okay, let's say our constraint is there should be at least one number to be processed. So if you say 0, that should be an error. So to say at least one number has to be processed. So you can already see this like an if then else statements there at the top level. And then let's say the user, now this time they say one number to be processed. If they say that, so now your program has to do some kind of report to say, well, you said that you're going to enter at most one number. And so far you haven't entered anything yet. So somehow you have to keep track to say whatever this one is, that's a maximum. At most one number can be entered, but now so far you have entered only 0 numbers. So now if I say I want to enter number 20, I hit enter here. So now your program should ask the user, would you like to continue entering a new number? Okay. But remember, they said at most they will get one number entered. So now I have entered one number already. So now if I say yes, your program should tell the user, error, you have already reached the maximum capacity of numbers. So certainly you cannot enter the second number, right? You see what I mean? So you can see the user say, I'm going to enter at most one number for you to process. Let me just try another example here. This might be a little bit too difficult. What about 3? If I say 3 here, that means the user can enter either one number, 2 numbers, or 3 numbers. They can decide. They are saying that I'm going to enter up to 3 numbers for you to get processed. Okay? So now, we're just telling the user to remind them, you said you're going to enter at most 3 numbers to the program. But so far, you have entered 0 numbers. So far, okay. So now let's say the first number I would like to enter is 20. If I do that, so the program is going to say, would you like to continue entering a new number? Let's say yes. So now I'm going to enter, you can see after this, they would say, you said you're going to enter at most 3 numbers, but so far you have entered just 1, which is 20, right? I know it's kind of difficult, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. I just want to make sure you understand what the output is doing. Okay, so now, they said, you said you're going to enter at most 3 numbers. So far you have entered 1, which is just 20. So let's say I want to enter 25. So that's the second number. If I do that, so 2 numbers have been entered already. So 20 and 25. Would you like to continue? Let's say I would like to continue. If I do that, you have entered 2 numbers already, right? 20 and 25. Okay, you can see it's keeping track. So now, if I enter the third number here, if I say 26, so now would you like to, so now 3 numbers have been entered. So I cannot enter any more numbers. So now, would you like to continue entering a new number? If I say no, I do not want to continue, then the program is going to say, you have entered so far these numbers, 20, 25, and 26. Okay, let me do one more, okay? So now, let me say, how many numbers? 3. So the first number I'm going to enter is 10. And the second number, 12. Oh, yes, I want to continue. I'll say yes. The second number will be 12. So now, after 12, I would say I don't want to continue to enter a number anymore. I would say no. In this case, it will tell me that you have entered 2 numbers so far, 10 and 12. The only constraint is I cannot enter more numbers than I initially said I would. Because initially I said I will enter at most 3 numbers. Everyone kind of get the idea? Okay. Can I just do one more? Okay, just to give you one example. Let's say, again, 3 numbers over here. So now the first number, let's say 20. I want to continue. Second number, 25. Okay, I want to continue again. So third number, okay, last one. If I say 23. Okay, would you like to continue or not? If now I say I want to continue, which means I want to enter a 4th number, that means that should be an error. Because I initially declared saying I should enter only 3, but now I'm entering the 4th. But if I say yes, it's going to say error. You already reached the maximum capacity of numbers. Okay, so you should launch the program again and try. Everyone kind of see the idea? The output. Okay? Looks hard, but we can do it together. Okay? So it's going to be a big case study for you. Okay, so don't worry, I'm not going to put a program like this for the quiz. That'll be too complicated. But try to take this as a case study. I also have the printout of the solution there. So let's do it together so you can type, and I'll give you the solution today as well, so you can study that. Okay, I think it's going to help you on the assignments. Let's do it together. Can I just give you a little bit quiz? Let's say this. If I have, let's say, 5 numbers. Okay, let's just try one more. A little bit larger here. 5 here. So now the program says you declare to say you want to enter 5 numbers. Now, so far, you haven't entered anything. So if I say 21, if I do that, would you like to continue? If I say yes, I want to continue. So now, because I have entered just one number so far, which is 21. Okay. So now, if I have another number 22, let's say, and would you like to continue? Let's say yes. So far, 2 numbers, which is 22 and 21. 2 numbers. I'm still okay because I can enter up to 5. Okay. So now enter a new number here. Let's say 23. Would you like to continue? Yes, I would like to. So now, basically 3 numbers have been entered. Okay. So 24. Okay. Would you like to continue? So 4 numbers so far. Okay, so now if I just enter another one, so that will be the 5th number I'm entering, 5th. Okay, would you like to continue? Now, if I say yes, I'm going to get an error because that means I'm entering the 6th number, which already exceeds the initial capacity I declare. Okay, so now if I say no, then it's okay. Then it will simply tell me these are the numbers so far you have entered. Okay, that's kind of the idea. So somehow imagine how we're going to do this. Conceptually, when the user initially declare like how many numbers at most they're going to enter, we're going to create an array accordingly. Let's say if they say I'm going to enter at most 5 numbers, then we're going to create an array of size 5 accordingly. If they say we're going to enter 10 numbers maximum, then we're going to initialize an array of size 10 accordingly. And then somehow we're going to gradually store the integers from the user from left to right in the array. But the trick to that is we have to maintain kind of like a pointer. So imagine this. Let me show you the idea, and then we can go ahead and do it. Let me just go back to this output here. So let's say initially the user say we're going to enter 5. So you can imagine we create a numbers array, and that is simply going to be an array of size 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So the first time when they enter 21, then we should store 21 over here as the first spot. And when they enter the second number 22, it should be stored here 23. And 24, let's say after the 4th number, they decided to quit. In this case, you can see, if you simply just print out the whole array, it's not going to work. Because you should really avoid this spot here. You should only print up to here, right? So what you need to do is, that's actually the tricky part for the case study. Somehow, you have to maintain like a counter over here to say, this is the last integer to look at So that's the last integer we store from the user. Anything that's to the right of this pointer here, we should ignore. So so usually the upper bound will just be numbers dot length minus 1. That's typically when we want to traverse the entire array. But in this case, we're actually going to use this as the upper bound rather than this number here. Okay, we'll see that in a moment. Okay, it's a bit complicated, but that's something we have to learn. Okay, I'll go through that with you. And also we'll use the debugger to see. But you kind of see what the program is supposed to do. So let's go ahead and do it. So let's go to array facilities here. So first of all, let's declare our normal scanner variable there. Scanner input equal to new scanner system.int. Okay, and now first of all, we're going to ask the user system.out.println. And remember, the first message you saw, you might let me remind you about it, is like how many numbers would you like to process? Okay, so let's do that. So go back here. You would say, ask the user, how many numbers would you like to process? Okay, that's a prompt message for the user. And then we're going to read an integer from the user. So we're going to use next int. Integer, let's call this capacity to say that's a maximum number of numbers you can read from the user. Capacity assigned to input.next int. Okay, so far we are okay. So now we're going to create oh, remember one thing. Let me remind you again. If you go back to your assignments there, let me show you. There was a section where I talk about if you try to use a mix of next int and next line, you certainly have to put a next line after every next int. So let me just show you there in case you haven't found that yet. So that's your assignment instruction here. You will see that there was a section at the end. Let me show you over here. Section 7. So there was some known issue about the scanner and string. Okay, over here I said that if you want to use the next int and you also want to use the next line, if you want to have a mix of them, what you gotta do is to make sure after every time you say input the next int, always put input the next line after that, always, to actually avoid some issues there. Okay, I'm gonna show you here. So actually also explain the why the issue is the case in section 7. You can read it through in the instruction. Okay, we'll do it now. Okay, so now after the next int, we're gonna say input dot next line. Okay, just put a one thing here. Okay, you can say C section 7 in the assignment 1 instruction. Okay, you will see there to actually see why it is the case. Okay, once we have read the capacity from there, first of all, before we can proceed, we have to make sure the capacity itself is actually positive. So we'd say, so that's from your quiz number 2. So we would say if capacity is less than or equal to 0, that means it's an error. We should process at least one number. So you say system.out.println. And here we'd say error, at least one number has to be processed. At least one number has to be processed. Okay? And the else part simply means capacity is strictly larger than 0, right? That's a negation of the branching condition for if. Yeah, so far no surprise. Okay, so now, if the capacity is strictly larger than 0, so now we can create the array. So now we can create the array using whatever capacity it is. It can be 5, it can be 10, any number. But we are pretty sure it's positive, so we can safely do that. So let's say integer array, and then you would say that's numbers. Assigned to integer, don't forget a new keyword here, integer, and then you would say capacity. So far so good? Okay, so far we haven't done any loops yet, not yet. So basically, so far what we have done, we prompt the user for a number to indicate how many numbers they are going to enter. They might enter some number that's less than this, but that's okay. But they certainly cannot enter more than this number eventually, otherwise you'll be in error. Okay. Okay, that's capacity here. So now let's see what else. Okay, so we're going to need a counter to actually record how many inputs we have read so far from the user. Okay, for example, here, if you record over here, let me just declare that variable first, so that'll be easier for you. So there's an integer number of inputs entered. Initially, simply 0. Okay, so number of inputs from the user entered. So now let's have a look at the console here. So remember, so after we enter 21, so that counter should be incremented to 1. And after we read the second input 22, that counter should be incremented to 2. And after the third number, that should be incremented to 3, and etc. So as soon as the counter reaches the maximum, the capacity, and the user still wants to continue enter a number, then that should be an error. Okay, that's sort of the idea. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So that's 0 in the beginning. So now, let me just give you some comments here. So about the capacity. Okay, so let me see what I should say here. Okay, okay, let me put some comments here. So number of inputs entered, this variable here, keeps track of how many numbers have been entered by the user so far. That's something we're going to use. Okay. So now we are going to need a while loop. Okay. And the while loop here is the state condition is going to be a little bit tricky. Okay, I'm going to write it out first, and then I'll show you how to interpret that. Okay, we just need another Boolean variable here. Boolean here, and then user wants to enter a new number. Okay, quite a long name, but it tells you what it is. So we're going every time after entering a new number, we're going to ask the user, would you like to enter another one? Okay, so they have to say either yes or no. Initially, let's say that's simply true. So we can enter the loop for at least once. Okay, so let's now do the while loop. Okay, the while loop here is going to look like this. Okay, let's just write it out. So the number of inputs entered less than capacity, and user wants to enter a new number. Okay, I'll stop here a little bit and let you continue first. And just let you type. So this is certainly more complicated than any of the while loops we have seen before. But in this case, it's going to be useful. Let's just stare at this for a moment. So basically, we're saying that we're going to repeat the body of the while loop as long as two conditions must be met. Two conditions. That's why I'm using conjunction here. First of all, so far we have not yet read numbers that already that exist the capacity. That's what the first relation says, right? Maybe capacity is simply 10, and so far maybe we have read only one number, so we can still keep reading. If we have read already, let's say 10 numbers, then of course we cannot keep reading anymore, right? And the second one is to say, as soon as the user actually wants to quit, so maybe they said, I'm going to enter 10 numbers to you, but after I enter 5 numbers, I want to quit already. In that case, they're going to say, I want to quit. In this case, they'll make this state condition false. Okay, so 2 conditions here. Okay, let's just see how this is going to work out, and then we can use the debugger a bit later. Okay, so now let me just put some comments for you. So you're going to say, keep prompting the user for a new number as long as 2 things are satisfied. 2 things. The first one is basically this relation here. Okay, the first one is simply that so far the number of inputs, like integer inputs, has not reached the capacity so far. Okay, and second, which is what this Boolean variable is saying, and the second one is the user wants to continue to enter a new number. Okay, so 2 conditions must be met at the same time. That's why it's a conjunction. Okay, this means that we may still exit from the loop. There's one scenario. If the maximum capacity is not reached, but the user wants to quit. We're going to see that in a moment. Okay, sorry so much typing for today, but I thought the comments can really help you understand what the loop is trying to do. So basically, this comment is trying to say, maybe, let's say capacity is actually 10. And so far, the user has entered only 5 numbers. But somehow, they decided to quit. And they say, that's it, I don't want to enter any more numbers. Which will make this false, and this true. And overall, it's going to be false. So it's going to exit from the loop. Okay, let's have a look at the while loop. Okay, let's see what we can do. So remember over there in the console, let me remind you. So somehow you have to report, first of all, to say at most how many numbers can be entered. And then so far how many has been entered. And then you're going to prompt the user for the number. Okay, these are the things you have to do. Okay, let me just do one by one. So first of all, we're going to prompt the user and say system.out.println. So you're going to say at most. So capacity, which doesn't change. Capacity at most, this many numbers can be entered. So we're just reminding the user. That's the first line. And then we say system.out.println. And now we are reminding the user so far how many numbers have you entered. Okay, so you can say so far, and remember the variables we declare over here, numbers of input entered. So initially that's simply 0, but it's going to be incremented gradually. So far, this many numbers have been entered. Okay, just a report. So basically, these 2 lines are going to give you stuff like that. Okay, like at most how many, and so far how many. Okay, we're going to run the debugger when we are done. Okay, go back. Okay, so now let's do the following. So now we're going to prompt the user for the new number. System.out.println. We're going to say enter a new number. And then over here, we're going to say the number is going to be entered by the user. So next int, integer, let's just say is n, number, equals input dot next int. And as I mentioned before, since we are mixing next int and next line, you have to put input dot next line immediately after this. Next line, not next. Okay, like that. Okay, so now, so far so good. Okay, we're only reporting and then just to enter a new number. Okay, so now here comes the trickiest part. of this case study. Only 2 lines. Let me write these 2 lines out first, and then I will explain that. Okay, 2 lines. Somehow we have to store the numbers into the array. However, I'm going to use this. I'm going to write this out first. And then, okay, these 2 lines. Okay, I'll wait you to type, and then I'll explain. Okay, everyone finished? Okay, let me explain how this works. Okay, so now let me remind you, let's say the user says they're going to enter a maximum 5 numbers. That's why we created an array of size 5 over here. And then we have like a counter to keep track. The number of inputs entered. Okay, so this one is going to gradually change. Okay, and let's say this is numbers array. I'll just put it there, so we're going to see that. Okay. So now, and also n over here. So now let's say initially it is simply 0, right? So 0 simply means the next time we're going to store a new number into the array, we're going to use this as the index. Okay, so now let's say the first number we read from the user, and just use a different color here. If the user first of all say 21, so that means we have to store 21 in this index 0 here. So we do that, so we put 21 over here. And then we have to increment the value of the number of inputs entered to 1. Because we just read 21, so this value here has to be incremented by 1. Okay? And we actually read 21 from there. Let's say next time the user enters 23, the second number. In this case, we're going to store the second number at index 1. Okay, index 1 is here. So we're going to store it here, 23. And then we're going to, so 23 here. And then after that, we're going to increment the value of this variable here by just another 1. And we'll keep going. Okay, so you see, so this variable here has 2 purposes. First of all, it records how many inputs have been read so far. And also, the value of that can be used as the index for the array. Okay, that's why I said it's the trickiest part for this exercise here. So you're going to think about that. Okay, good. Okay, let's go back to this code again. So you can see we are trying to store something into this numbers array. And we're using exactly the value of this variable here, numbers of input entered. That is going to be assigned to whatever number n we read from the user. Okay, we're going to run the debugger in a moment. And then after that, since we have just read a new number, so of course we have to update the value for number of inputs entered plus plus by 1. And then you can see somehow one of the state condition here depends on the value of this variable here. So as soon as we get to the capacity, the maximum capacity, we have to exit from the loop. Okay? So far so good? Okay. So now let me just write one more line, and then we can actually run a debugger and see how that works. So let me just say system.out.println. Let's just say exit from the while loop. Let's just say that. Okay, and now I'm going to run the debugger with you and see how that works. Let's put a breakpoint in this line here. When we say how many times would you like to process, how many numbers would you like to process? So now let's say the following. So now if we say run debug as Java application. So now we are here. Let me just show you that. You can see now we are stopped at this point, this line here. How many lines would you like to process? If we say step over, we're going to print that line to the console. How many numbers would you like to process? Okay, so now we're going to read an integer. So let's enter 5 for now. So 5, something exactly like that. So say 5. Hit enter and then step over. So now you can see that in the variables panel over there, you can see capacity has been set to 5. Okay, so now let's step over again. So now we're going to check to see if the capacity is less than or equal to 0. It is false. So that means we don't have an error. 5 is okay. So we're going to step over and we go to the else branch. So now you can see this line here. We're going to use the capacity value, which is 5, to create an array accordingly. So we don't see the array numbers in the variables yet. But after we say step over, we do have the numbers array over here. Okay? But initially, it simply contains nothing, just 0, 0, 0. So these numbers are just meaningless to us. Okay. Okay, so far we have a numbers array of size 5. The size corresponds to the capacity value. Okay, so we can only store up to 5 values in this array. Okay, so we have the control. Okay, so now we're going to step over again, and now you can see that we just initialize the number of inputs entered variable to be 0. Okay, and we also have another Boolean variable. If we step over again, so you can see we also have a Boolean variable here. User wants to enter a new number. Okay, initially just true. So now we are now in the while loop here to check the state condition for the very first time. Okay, I would suggest we try the expression panel. So if we simply just copy this condition here, this conjunction here, if you just go to edit and copy, okay, if you go to expression here, let me just delete the previous one and say remove all. Okay, add a new expression and paste. If you do that, it's going to tell you something. Okay, it should tell you. Why wouldn't that tell me? It's strange. So if I say, okay, number of inputs entered, my expressions actually behave weirdly. Let me try again. Number of inputs entered, no value here. Does your expression panel come up with any value by any chance? No? That's weird. Okay, what? Okay, let's not be delayed by this. Okay, if you look at the variables here, okay, let's see what I should do over here. I don't even have the variables here. What's wrong? If I simply say, I actually lost that already. Can I just try again? Sorry, can I just launch the debugger again? I don't know why. Okay, I stopped the process already, so now I'm going to start over again. So if I click on this debug button here, I'm going to start over again. Okay, so we're back here. So if you say step over, we're going to read the integer 5 over here, and then we're going to have the capacity check. We go to else part, and we got that. So we have numbers here, an array of size 5, that's good. And now we also initialize the numbers of input entered to be 0, and then we go on. So now we're here. Okay, if I now see the expression, okay, now it comes up. Sometimes Eclipse doesn't work, you just gotta restart the session, I'm afraid. Okay, anyway, so now you can see that the numbers of inputs entered is simply 0. Okay, and let's see, capacity is 5. So now if I try that relation over there, you can see that, just copy that and paste. It's true. Okay, so that for the left operand for this conjunction here is simply true. And what about the right operand? If I paste user wants to enter a number, that will be true as well, simply because we initialize that to be true. Okay, so now if I do what I did before, if I copy this whole thing here, edit and copy. Now, if I paste that here, it's going to be true, which means initially the state condition simply evaluates to true. So we're going to enter the while loop for the very first time. Okay, let me step over. So now, first of all, we're going to report at most how many numbers can be entered. And this depends on the capacity value. You can see the capacity here is simply 5, right? So if you step over, it's going to say at most 5 numbers can be entered. And so far, how many? You can see in the numbers of input entered is 0. So far, 0 numbers have been entered. Okay? And now, we're going to prompt the user for a new number. If you say step over again, enter a new number, and let's say 21. Enter and step over. So now you can see that there's a new variable called n, which is 21. So now somehow we're going to store 21 into numbers array into 0 index. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Okay, but how do we actually store that? So what we're going to do is we're going to use the value of numbers of inputs. So for simple values, you can even move your mouse over the variables in Eclipse in the debugger mode. They will also show you the current value, which is 0. So that means we're going to store n, which is 21, into index 0 of numbers array. Okay, let's predict what's going to happen. So in this array here, we're going to replace the first element here by 21. That's what's going to happen. So if you say step over, indeed, it has been replaced by 21. Okay, good. So now we have to update the counter. So now if we watch what's going to happen here, if I say step over, it has been incremented from 0 to 1. Okay, good. So now we're back to the beginning of the while loop. So now if you go back to the expression view, you can see that this is the state condition. It's still true. Simply because we have so far entered one number and the capacity is 5. We're okay. And the user wants to enter a new number. That's something we have to ask them for. Okay. So far so good. Okay. So now let's just go on just one more time. Okay. So now let's say enter a new number here. If I say 22, okay, 22, and then go ahead, and now you can see in the variables here, n has been updated to 22. So now if you see the numbers array here, so we're going to replace the second slot by 22. That's what we're going to do. And you can see now we're going to do numbers at index 1, simply because we actually incremented the value for numbers of inputs entered in the previous iteration by 1. So we're going to replace that by 22. And if you step over, it has been replaced by 22, right? Okay, we keep going until we cannot go on anymore, like that. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so now just one more thing for me to to write. Okay, so far we haven't really asked the user, would you like to continue? So let me just say that. So system.out.println here. So you would say, would you like to enter a new number? And you can say either yes or no, y or n. In this case, we're going to get an answer from the user, as we actually did in the previous exercise. It's assigned to input dot next line. Okay, so now we are going to say the user wants to enter a new number. So you can see that's sort of the second operand for the conjunction there. We're gonna we're gonna update that accordingly. So we'd say that it would be assigned to true if the answer, if you want to compare a string value, we got to use the dot equals method, right? If that's equals, simply y. Okay, which means if they enter y, then this will be true, and then we're going to say user wants to enter a new number will be true, otherwise false. If they enter n, for example, so that means this part will be set to false, and when we go back to the very beginning of the while loop, this part will be false, and the state condition will be false, which means we'll exit from the loop. Okay. So let's try that quickly. So now it's not debugging. I'm just trying to demonstrate the output. How many numbers? Let's say 5. Let's say I enter the very first number, 21. Would you like to enter a new number? I say no. Okay, then we exit from the while loop. That's something you can try. Okay, we're almost done. Almost done. So now we would like to say, after we exit from the while loop, we're going to do something here. So first of all, we can say this is end of while loop. Just put some comments here. And now one quiz for you. When we exit from the while loop, that means this part here is going to evaluate to false, right? So can you simplify that expression? So that's going to be the negation of this conjunction here. So what's going to be? So what should that be? So that's going to be the negation of this conjunction here. It's going to be, for example, the left one. It's going to be negation of less than. So that means the number of, exactly, thank you, number of inputs entered greater than or equal to capacity, or, right, it is not the case that user wants to continue. So this means we exit from the loop if one of the conditions is true, either because the user has already entered too many numbers, they have entered the maximum number of numbers already, or they simply say they want to quit. They simply say N for no. Either way. And now, this part here also requires a little bit of thinking. Okay, somehow we're going to, let me just put an if condition here. We want to print out the following error message. Let me just print it out first. Print line. So here I would say error, you have entered, you have already reached the maximum capacity of numbers. In this case, that's an error, so you should really say something like launch the program and try again. Okay, so this is the case where, let's say the user say they're going to enter 10 numbers. They have really entered 10 numbers already, but they want to enter an 11th number. In that case, we should really give them an error. Okay, so now this is the tricky part. What should we say here? Okay, so that is why I actually ask you about what's really the exit condition for the loop. So we know that when we actually exit from the while loop, either this is true or this is true. Okay, but both can be true at the same time. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so now let me see what I want to write here. Yes. So what I want to write here is the following. If it is the case that we have already reached the maximum capacity and the user actually wants to continue, right? Because let's say the user has already entered 10 numbers, they reached the maximum, and when we ask them, would you like to continue? And they say yes, that should be considered as an error. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to continue without any error. Okay. So in this case, let me just put one more comment for you. If we get to the else part, that simply means the if part is actually false. Okay, so what's that equivalent to? I'm going to write it down for you. In this case, it's going to be less than or not. Okay, something like that. You can have a look at that later. So now, all we got to do now is to report how many the numbers they have entered. System.out.println. You have entered the number of inputs entered. We're going to use this variable here, which correctly keeps track of how many numbers the user has entered. This many numbers. And they are printed as follows. So now we're going to use a for loop. So now I'm going to write something which is not exactly correct. You're going to help me out to see how to make it correct. If I say integer I equals 0, I less than numbers dot length I plus plus, and then I say system dot out dot println I. Okay, so is this, so write it out first. Let's say in this case here, the user entered 21, 23, and 25. After 3 numbers, the user said, I want to quit. Let's say that's the case. So now, what I would like to see in the output is, so far you have entered 3 numbers, and they are 21, 23, and 25. Okay, would this for loop do it? I've looked at the loop carefully. I can tell you that there are 2 mistakes in this for loop. 2. Is the for loop going to print out exactly 21, 23, and 25? And of course, currently the number of inputs entered will just be equal to 3. Currently.
Another if statement.
You need another if statement where?
Like after the like before system out println. Like
Okay.
you can have an if statement that is to not to print out if the value is equal to 0.
Oh, I see what you mean. So I see what you mean, because you thought if they haven't been set up, they will simply be 0. Okay, that's one way, but this is a better way. That might work, that would work, but it's a slightly better way. So why don't we use the this variable here? Somehow we can use it. So the bottom line is, in this case, we should not print out the entire array. We should only print this one, this one, this one, but not every one to the right. So why not we simply do the following? Less than, rather than the last index here, we can simply use number of inputs entered, right? Because in this case, number of inputs entered will just be set to 3. And we say less than that, so we're going to try 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so that's something you also have to convince yourself that actually works. It's actually a better solution. Okay, one more mistake. There's one more mistake. So now the bounds are okay. And look at what we are trying to print. So in this case, we'll only print out 0, 1, and 2, rather than 21, 23, 25. So we should really index into the array, right? So that's the missing part. Okay. So be very careful. So now we should really say numbers I. Okay, let's do that, and then let's try again. Okay, done. That's about it. And then we'll do some extension a bit later. Okay, let's say, how many numbers would you like to process? Let's say 3. Okay, 3 numbers. Okay, and most 3 numbers can be entered so far as 0. Let's say 21. Would you like to continue? Yes. So far we have entered 1 number. Okay, what about 22? I want to continue. Yes. So far 2 numbers. And enter a new number here, 23. Let's say I have entered 3 numbers already. But now, if I say I want to continue again to enter the 4th number, it's an error. Okay, one more. If I say 3 numbers, so 21. Let's say I don't want to continue, just 1 number. In this case, I would say no. They would say you have entered 1 number only, so it's 21. Okay, any questions? I know it's complicated, so that's why I say it's a case study, right? So I'll give you the solution. I actually got a solution already, but I'll give you the printout as well, so you can study for that. So that's part one for today.